Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, everyone. Successful Living. I am your host today and your guest as we talk about success. And one of the things that I think is so important, there are so many things and components that we need to be mindful of as we navigate life and look for the best way to achieve the things we're trying to achieve, the goals that we set forth for ourselves and our family. However, one of the things that I'm going to focus on today is the importance of thinking. And it's so important that I think we need to spend time. Certainly we're thinking all the time. Thoughts race through our mind all day long, and even when we sleep, we're dreaming. So we're thinking all the time. The mind is at work. But I'm talking about today using our thought process and thinking in a deliberate way to make life easier. Once again, to set forth the goals that we're trying to achieve. And I'm going to bring out that there are different kinds of thinking. And there's, if we think about, there it is, thinking. If we think about thinking itself and use it as in the way that it's created to be, I think we're going to all do better, and I remind myself of this all the time. And first of all, I'm going to bring forth a quote. Think about this. Here is Henry Ford. He says, thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few people engage in it. There's Henry Ford talking about the idea of thinking. Now, we also have to say we have to have action. We can't focus just on thinking and sitting around or contemplating. And here's what Bruce Lee says. He says, if you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done. So we must act too. So in the idea of success, thinking plays an important role, but no doubt about it, we have to have action. And here's what Zig Ziglar says. He says, positive thinking will let you do everything better than negative thinking. That's Mr. Zig Ziglar. And I also want to tell you that as far as reading, I think reading helps us be great thinkers and be the different kinds of thinkers that we need to be. But reading, one of the things that I do is always have two books going, at least two books. One, I try to have a business book at all times. And some of the people that have influenced me from the business book standpoint is Mr. John C. Maxwell. Great. He's a great thinker, great person to hear his tenets on success. And he also puts things in such a beautiful, simple way to help us. So I'd recommend any of the John Maxwell books. And certainly just finished hearing on audiobook the book Born to Win by Zig Ziglar. Also, that is timeless information. Great thinking comes from that as we use our cars. In that case, like I said, that's an audiobook. I was listening to that as I drove around, making use of my driving time. And then one of the new authors that came to my ideas here lately was Dr. Dave Martin. He's been a guest on this show. That's Dr. Dave Martin, and he has a new book called Another Shot. So I bought that book at one of his book signings here in Houston, and I'm in the process of reading that. That means that we go back and take another shot at life. So let's look at the idea of thinking, the importance. Now, we know life is busy. As I said, we're thinking about things all the time, even when we sleep. But what I'm talking about is taking time throughout the day. Let's take the business category. First of all, you want to take time. We have a lot of things in the business world that we're trying to achieve in our profession. So we want to take that certain times and think about it. That means that we want to think about our profession, what we do, how we can add value to our company or our business. And also, when we break it down to certain projects that we're working with, take time aside and say, look, I'm going to think specifically about this project. Yes, as the week begins, we may have several things that are on the boards to address, but no doubt about it, take each one of those separately and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this event. Like for me, I have an event this week at the end of the week. I have two things that are very important. So I'm going to take specific time to stop, turn off the phone, not look at the email, and just take time, however long it takes, to make sure I contribute the most to this event that I have coming up. In fact, I have a lot of events coming up. This time of year is very busy for me. So what I'm doing is compartmentalizing those events and specifically thinking, how can I add value to each and every one of those? How can I get the most from it? And then how can I influence and even help others in each of these things? And also, I want to make sure I want to have a little bit of fun along the way. Fun's very important in our lives. In fact, it has been said, and I think it was John Maxwell that said this. He says it's not work unless you'd rather be doing something else. So if you can find a profession where you are enjoying what you do, where you wouldn't even need to get paid, you're in the success zone there big time. So once again, thinking. So there's a little bit of there's an idea about some business thinking that we can do. Set time aside, maybe at the beginning of the day for the total idea of project, but then go into each and every project. Another thing that's done in the business world a lot, in fact, we do it all the time. At the end of the year, we think about, okay, what have I achieved? Did I reach the goals that I set forth? That's business thinking. Did I reach those goals that I set forth? And also, how am I preparing? What am I preparing for? And how am I preparing for next year? And this is a great time of year to be thinking about that. So there's that thought, that review and the planning ahead. And then I guess that could be called thinking about the big picture. So we think about the big picture, in this case, 2016, what lies ahead, some business thinking. Then we're thinking about that big year that's ahead of us, and sometimes we're thinking beyond it, whatever age we are, if we're coming out of college, if we're in the teen years, if we are in our 50s, 60s, we want to think about that 5 years ahead. We want to think about the 10 years ahead. But once again, simple tip, make time and just do it. Do that thinking and then put that into an action plan. That's very important. We want to put it into an action plan. Now, I'm going to give you a tip, too, something that I like to do on a daily basis. And this isn't necessarily business thinking, but this has to do with thinking about the day. So when I get ready in the morning, I take care of my responsibilities. Before I go to the office or before I go to my first appointment, I take time, usually with a cup of coffee, and with my two dogs, Callie and Elvis. I sit with them, have the coffee, and just sit for a minute. Maybe, I say a minute, more like 5 to 10 minutes. I try to have a buffer time. I try to have that time to where I'm not thinking specifically about a business matter, or if it's not a day that I'm working, I'm not thinking about work. I'm thinking about just enjoying that moment, enjoying the 10 minutes. I believe that you have to have in your schedule throughout the day some buffer time to where you take a break. As you plan your appointments, if that's the kind of business you're in with appointments and things, you want to have a little bit of buffer time. You want to have a barrier. That way you can be if it's an appointment situation, you can be at that appointment on time by getting there in advance, but also just have some times throughout the day where you take that break. And in this case, taking the break where you sit and think or stand or in the car, I think that's very important. Another thing that happens too, in my case, exercise. When I exercise, and usually what I do is walk. Sometimes I cycle. Exercising is very important. That provides some great thinking time. I mentioned dogs. Maybe you have dogs. That is a great time to get some ideas. And one of the tips that I'd give you is when I walk the dogs. If I have an idea, I don't have a pen or I'm not going to stop and write. But when I'm walking the dogs, thinking about ideas in whatever category of life that's important at the time, I'll take out my iPhone, my recorder, and verbally talk into that and say, here's ideas about this thing coming up, or here's ideas about a music idea. I'm also involved in music. So I'll use the recorder as I'm walking. I could put those ideas down, visit them later. So one of the beauties of thinking is that we can, number one, put time aside. Also realize that there are different kinds of thinking. There's thinking about business. There's creative thinking. And creative thinking applies to all the categories of life. Creative thinking is going to let us think about our business, solving our goals or reaching our goals sometimes in creative ways in our business, and also solving problems in a creative way and taking that time without making too quick of a judgment. Certainly, speed is of the essence in business, but timing is a better way to look at it. We don't want to do something too quick and make an error. So anyway, thinking, creative thinking, but have some tools at your disposal when you think. And one I said, as I walk, or even if you're not walking, using the recording app on your iPhone is a great way to do it, and it's very handy. And then also, some people use journals where they write things down. In fact, I have a book too. It's called an idea book, and I write down things. It could be about anything. I'm involved in the real estate profession at Stewart Title. I help develop business for Stewart Title. So I have a clear goal of things that I have to accomplish there. I'm hosting this radio show. I'm hosting a show for Stewart Title called Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title. You can hear that at 1 o'clock on 100.7 FM or on my YouTube channel, Bill Napick Radio Shows. Again, that's Bill Napick Radio Shows, where you'll hear these shows from Successful Living and the Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title shows. So in any case, I have different categories of my life. I have the business, the real estate side. I have a music side. I'm a musician. So I'm thinking all the time, and I'm putting ideas together in what I'm calling this idea book. And once again, it's nice when you write it down, but it's also nice when you can use the recording app on your phone to take these ideas down if you're, say, driving or doing something where you can't stop and write something down. So we are talking about the importance of thinking. And I want you to think about that while we take a break. We're going to come right back. You're listening to Successful Living, and we're going to continue the idea of how to make thinking an art form for us all and make it effective. And we're going to take a break and come right back. You're listening to Successful Living.
It's a fresh approach to caring for people with memory loss, Alzheimer's disease, or other dementia-related symptoms. It's Sundance Memory Care, the premier memory care community in Texas. Sundance Memory Care gives extra care with a 6-to-1 resident-to-care ratio. The goal is to lift up and support residents with a level of care that engages the resident and includes their family. Sundance Memory Care has regular contact with specialists and industry leaders with the most innovative memory care resources. Visit SundanceMemoryCare.com or call 281-769-2632 to learn more about them and schedule a tour with one of their directors. That's SundanceMemoryCare.com.
You're listening to Successful Living with Bill Napick. As a well-known speaker and business development expert, Bill will coach you to help bring your business to the next level. In addition to being your go-to source for expert advice on making your business more successful, be sure to call Bill, known as Houston's Title Guy, to help you close your real estate transaction. Bill's attention to detail and standards of excellence, coupled with Stewart Title's financial stability and strength, will ensure a great experience closing your real estate transaction. All title representatives are not the same. When you are making such an important investment as real estate, you want the best. You want Bill Napick working for you. Call him at 713-210-9767. That's 713-210-9767. Now, get ready for more motivation and inspiration. Successful Living with Bill Napick is coming back right now.
And welcome back to Successful Living. Today we're talking about thinking, using thinking. Thinking is our friend. We're doing it all the time. How about some constructive thinking? How about taking time aside? And I also want to say that one of the things that we think about in thinking is thinking we could use it as prayer. Think about this. Matthew 6, verse number 33. Jesus said, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you." Verse 34, "Therefore don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." So we want to think about that. We want to think and pray and also seek God's kingdom. That's very important as we look at business. We look at all the things we're doing in life. I mentioned I'm involved in music, real estate, all these things. But seeking first the kingdom, I think that's the way to go. When I think about that, that helps guide my other thinking. That helps guide my thinking in the other categories of life. And we also think about thinking as an idea of a way of renewing our mind. I want to point to another scripture, Romans 12:2. "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So that's a great idea, that thinking helps us. And when we pray, that's very important too. When we think, that helps us renew our mind. And when we take it another step further, when we think about the idea of renewing our mind, by renewing it, we get the bad ideas out, and we get the bad out, we get the good in, and that gives us ideas. Think about this. I mentioned before the break about ideas, that I write down ideas, and if I'm walking or moving around, I'll record my ideas on my iPhone, but then I put it into my idea book. Sometimes I take these ideas and review them and say, hey, here's perhaps a good business idea, or here's a good idea I can use in my personal life or in my winning walk with God. So ideas are super important. Take it into business context once again. If you, in a business meeting, the person with the ideas is the person that contributes the most to the company or to the team or to the group. It's very, very important, ideas. So write them down, capture them, because again, our mind works so fast, so quickly. Now here's another verse from the Bible about thinking of what to think about. In Philippians 4, verse number 8. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. So that kind of is a biblical version of think about what is good. I mentioned the quote from Zig Ziglar, but think about the things that are good. The Bible tells us those things. Think about what is good, what is right. If we put our minds and think about the right things and good things, things of God, that will help us in all the categories of life. So once again, let's go back to the idea of ideas. Thinking creates ideas, and sometimes we may not. I'm talking about devoting a certain amount of time to our thinking, and yes, also devote time to our prayer, but going to thinking. In the thinking mode, we will develop ideas. We want to capture them, and then we want to apply the good ones where they can help us. But sometimes, without having special time set aside for thinking, we may have ideas just pop in, capture those ideas too. Some of the greatest things, and I'm a big music fan, I'm a musician as well, but I look at some of the great songs, and I believe we have lived in an era here in the last 40 years, even 50 years, with such great musicians. And I think of these songs that have shaped our culture and our anthems for our culture, anywhere from Frank Sinatra to the Rolling Stones to the Beatles, the Beach Boys. I mean, I love all that stuff. But these songs, I was reading where Keith Richards wrote the song Street Fighting Man, and behind every song, there's an idea. These guys these people capture the ideas, and all songs work differently as far as methods, but it was interesting to see his account of how he wrote Street Fighting Man, where the idea developed. They put the music together first. He consulted with Charlie Watts, the drummer of the Rolling Stones. They put that song together and then went to Mick Jagger, and he put the words to it after the music was already done. Street Fighting Man, killer song. And then, of course, in the break, we heard the Jimi Hendrix song. So any kind of music, whatever kind it is, and the kind we've been exposed to these years, the last 40 years, 50 years, have been great, from Elvis to Sinatra to the Stones, all along the way. These guys, these people have had ideas. They put them down. They put them into music. And that's a perfect example of how, from a financial standpoint, if you have something that catches on, that sells, this music is and continues to pay dividends to the artist and to their respective estates after they're long gone. In fact, some of these guys like John Lennon, Elvis, they're making more money now that they're not alive on this earth. So it's very interesting, the power of an idea. That power of an idea from the creative standpoint, again, happens in books. I mentioned the book Born to Win. Zig Ziglar has been gone, but that book continues to be a super seller all around the world in many languages. So that is the beauty of thinking. That's the beauty of an idea. So I want to review a little bit as we're getting close to the end of the show. I'm telling you something you already know. You know you should think, but I'm suggesting to you today to look at it in a different way. Look at it for the value, the importance, the jewel, the gem that thinking can be. Look at it in a different way, and that will add to your success in life. That will add to enriching your relationships, perhaps, if used properly. And then there's collaborative thinking, where you're talking, in the case of a spouse, you want to collaborate with your spouse and thinking about the things in the family. But most of all, the things to do about thinking, number one, set time aside. Yes, have your business thinking, have your creative thinking, but also have just some buffer time thinking where you relax and you're thankful for the things that you have, for the health that you have, and the position and station in life you are. So have that time of appreciation, and then, of course, use prayer in addition to special time thinking, we'll call it that today. Set that time aside. Look at thinking after you hear this show. Look at it in a new way this week. And I think you really get some benefits from it. I know that as I have focused on the idea of thinking this year, many, many benefits have made themselves known to me. So I'm really excited about that. So once again, use the idea of thinking, the creative thinking, the business thinking. In fact, I'll challenge you, if you have a business problem, something to solve that's really bugging you, let's say, take that time aside, write down the components, and then just spend time thinking, okay, how can I creatively solve this problem? What do I need to do? What are the action steps? Here's the problem, and just spend that time thinking. And the idea of thinking to me is very important because I have a hard time paying attention. I have a hard time staying focused. So for me, the idea of thinking and the purposeful thinking makes me focus better and focus more. So that way I'm not as distracted because I have to take that time aside to focus and to think properly. So make time to think about the right things. Don't forget about Philippians 4:8, whatever is true, whatever is honorable. Think about the right things. And as you renew and transform your mind with this great thinking, I think your life will be more enriched. And by thinking, it'll kind of slow us down. There's thinking about being thankful. So before we always worry about having more, getting more, making more, thinking about right now how great it is and how fortunate and blessed we are, that is super important. So you are listening to Successful Living with Bill Napick. I am your host, telling you today about thinking, what I think about it, and some of the ideas to bring forth for you. Hopefully it helps you to where you can have some purposeful thinking and not run around so much and worry about the phones, but to stop, relax, get some thinking, get focused on things. It's going to be a lot better when you apply this. I know it has been for me. Successful Living. And I want to point you to, again, we have the real estate radio show called Real Estate Matters with Stuart Title, 1 o'clock on this channel, 100.7 FM, or go to Stuart.com/Houston. Again, Stuart.com/Houston, a full archive abundant with great guests talking about real estate and talking about Houston lifestyle, even contributions from people outside of Houston. But you can hear those shows and the archives of this show, Successful Living, now that we're, 47, 48 shows in, go to Bill Napick Radio Shows. And that's Napick, K-N-A-P-I-K. Bill Napick Radio Shows. That is my YouTube channel. And if you're familiar with YouTube channels, just go to YouTube or go to Google, Bill Napick Radio Shows, and the YouTube channel will pop up. And you will not only hear the shows, but you'll see some of the video I put along with it just to keep things interesting. Successful Living, Bill Napick Radio Shows. Check it out. We hope you tune in next week. Thinking and challenging you today. Take some time to think, put it aside, and think purposefully about the important things in your life. Until next week, Successful Living with Bill Napick. We'll see you then, and thanks for listening.
It's a fresh approach to caring for people with memory loss, Alzheimer's disease, or other dementia-related symptoms. It's Sundance Memory Care, the premier memory care community in Texas. Sundance Memory Care gives extra care with a 6-to-1 resident-to-care ratio. The goal is to lift up and support residents with a level of care that engages the resident and includes their family. Sundance Memory Care has regular contact with specialists and industry leaders with the most innovative memory care resources. Visit SundanceMemoryCare.com or call 281-769-2632 to learn more about them and schedule a tour with one of their directors. That's SundanceMemoryCare.com.